Well, speaking of technological snafus, apparently our producer had one of those already today, and he wants to give you the most sincerest of apologies because he saw your number on this photo, and then he had to learn from you, Troy. That's not you.
Well, it's actually funny because I did a thing for a T-shirt company up in Canada, and they sent me a couple of the samples, and I was like, great, I love it, but they actually were using the picture of Kyle there on the left-hand side as my picture that they had on the T-shirt. And I said, that's great, but that's not me.
So, John, you can feel better. You're not the first one to use that picture and make a mistake.
Muzz, let's talk about that team of yours that you get to enjoy and talk about for a long, long time. How, I guess the first thing I'm curious about, how have they recovered from, the whole debacle that was going on here in the past couple of years or so?
Well, I think that, rather than kind of just wandering around middling in the standings, which doesn't get you anywhere, you have to be a contender, or you might as well try and figure out how to do a rebuild. And the hardest decisions that they had to make, was moving on from Taves and Kane. Now, Taves' health kind of solved its own problems there, and then Kane was hurt as well, had the hip surgery, but they made a decision that they had to move on. They had to turn the page before they could figure out what they were going to do. And it's been tough. The fans in Chicago have to sit through this and kind of endure the rebuild, but they were very fortunate to get the first overall pick when Connor Bedard was available. He's a generational type of player, so they automatically had somebody with star power and something that they could kind of market their brand around a little bit more. So it's been a process here. They've got a lot of really good young talent in the pipeline coming up. A lot of guys in college, a lot of guys in juniors. So there's a bright future ahead. It's just going to take a few years to get to that point. They've decided that for a lot of the young players, like a Kevin Korchinski last year, who came in as a 19-year-old, and because of the rules, Craig, you know this, that you can't send a junior player to the American Hockey League. They have to go back to their junior team, and they just decided it'd be better for him to stick around at the NHL level. But it just, he didn't progress the way that he needed to. He was probably a little bit ahead of his skis at some time during the season last year. He had some great moments, but I think for him to go down in the American Hockey League and kind of hone his skills, get playing again, gets his confidence there, and when the time is right, they'll bring those guys up. And so that's why they went out and signed some veteran players to kind of fill the role. They're a much more experienced team than they were last year. And they decided that, with Connor Bedard, they wanted to go out and try and find some guys that could complement him as well. So Todd Bertuzzi was one of the guys they brought in, Teuvo Teravainen with the high skill level. So they're trying to do some things to help Connor along without trying to tax the young players and put them in positions where they're not quite ready yet.
Troy, we've seen teams with guys that have drafted guys like Bedard before. We saw it with McDavid. We saw it with guys where they take that captaincy and they give the C to the 19, 20-year-old kid right away, and they let them kind of effectively grow into it and learn it on the fly. Chicago went a little bit a different route. They went with giving Nick Foligno the captaincy, and you talked about the veteran guys. In your view, being around that team, how important was that to kind of allow that to be something that is down the line as opposed to slapping an additional thing on Bedard as this 20-year-old, like some teams have done with those young guys?
Yeah, that's a real good question. And there was a lot of thought that went into it from a lot of people last year, but I don't think that they wanted to burden him with that. And he's got enough on his plate right now. But the one thing is that he is mature and he understands who he is and what he means to the league. Does he want to be in that position? He really doesn't have the personality that's outgoing. He's a very quiet guy and very determined and focused in what he needs to do. And I just don't think that he was ready. Time will tell to see where he is as far as, in the leadership group moving forward. But I thought it was the best idea that they decided to go with Nick Foligno, who's just been a great addition to the team. And they've signed him to a couple more years because they want him around. He's just been tremendous. He's played well, put it that way, on the ice. he's been able to back it up with his play on the ice. But he just brings so much experience, and he, without being the leader inside the room last year, he became the vocal leader of the team. And I think it was a good decision. They've got some good guys in the room like Seth Jones, Connor Murphy, who are a couple of the assistants, and then you brought in the veteran guys like Patrick Maroon, who's been fantastic. Love the guy, and there's a reason why he won 3 Stanley Cups in a row with some good teams. They want that type of guy inside your room. He's full of energy. He's happy to be in Chicago. So surrounding Connor Bedard with the right type of leadership skills that hopefully, in a few years or whatever it is, when his time is ready, that it'll be an easier transition rather than forcing it on at this time.
Well, if you get a chance to say so to Pat Maroon, please tell him Owen said hello, because usually he and I were in Adirondack together in Glens Falls back in 2009-10 when we were both with the Adirondack Phantoms. And I agree with you. His character is top notch. He's a great guy. I would always see him, like when he was in St. Louis, he'd come to Dallas. But you guys have something wrong with the schedule makers in the NHL, because tomorrow night you'll be in Dallas. For the second straight trip, you've had to play a game like you will tonight in Chicago and then get on the plane and play a back-to-back against the Stars, which doesn't seem fair because the Stars have been rested for both of those occasions. And then on the to top it all off, that Stars trip you had last time was the beginning of a 5-game Western road trip where you went to Colorado and then out to California. You're back for a couple games. You got to go right out to Seattle and Vancouver. Is this up there as far as tough road starts to the season?
Well, it's been unusual, that's for sure. They started with 4 games on the road, then came home and played some games at home, and then went out for the 5-game road trip again. And then just the one home game, and then out to Dallas. And that's never an easy trip to get into Dallas. It's about a 3:00 in the morning arrival at the hotel, so probably no morning skate tomorrow. You can complain all you want about the schedules. And like you said, right after this, the team's going to head out to Seattle and Vancouver for another 2-day trip. But, every team in the league can complain about their schedule. It is what it is. The back-to-backs, traveling, at night to the next city after playing at home is not unusual. It's just sometimes maybe a little bit frustrating that, you don't get to play a good team on even terms as far as being rested and ready to go. But it is like it is in the NHL, and everybody's going to complain now or then.
Hey, Muzz, I'm not sure if you heard us talking before you came on. We were talking about Tyler Seguin, and
I couldn't figure out how to get on, so no, I wasn't listening.
That's why I said that. So we were talking about Segi and what they're going to try to do is manage his games, and he's had some injury, that he's had to go through rehab and all this kind of stuff and make sure he's there. My question is, and things that we've talked about it, playing center versus playing wing. Like, the wear and tear. Is there any wear and tear having to play on the wall versus down the middle, a lot more skating versus that? You have any opinion on what it may affect Tyler by playing on the wall more than in the middle of the ice?
Well, there's more board battles, obviously, along when you're playing wing and you're in your own end of the ice, the defense is pinching down. So there's that wear and tear on your body that you're always trying to get pucks out, and there's always defensemen there trying to defend you. You know that as well as anybody. But I think the center position, there's not as much contact, but there's more skating because, in some ways, and it's not true in today's game because the first guy back in the zone now defensively usually is the low guy, where before, when in our era, the centerman was the guy that was inside the offensive zone, and he was the guy that would get back in the defensive zone. So more skating in the defensive as a centerman than it would be as a winger, especially when you have to come back in the defensive zone. But I don't think the wear and tear is as hard as it is along the boards. And it's just, it's not an easy game wherever you play it. But I think, if you're looking at Tyler, you realize how old he is, how effective he can be if he has more rest than playing the games. Is he more, Dallas is going to make the playoffs. So, where do you want to be? Do you want to be first, second, third, wherever it is? Or do you want to have a healthy and ready team to go where it doesn't matter in your positioning? So if that's their thought process moving forward, I have no problem with it. And, Tyler will be one of the guys that will say, hey, I need a little bit of a break here if the wear and tear is getting a little bit too much.
Troy, I wanted to ask you, speaking of a winger, but of one on the Blackhawks that will come to Dallas on Thursday here, Ryan Donato has been off to a pretty good start. year, and he's been. Is it what? Sometimes we always say like to play with great players. Hey, you're just playing with great players, but there is a skill to that. Like when you watch Donato and with how he plays with Bedard, what works so well for him, and what's worked so well for his start to the year?
Well, first of all, Ryan is a great kid, and he came into training camp this year, and he didn't know if he was going to make the team. He didn't know if he was going to be sent down. He didn't know if he was going to be an extra. But he came in with a great attitude, and he worked extremely hard. And one thing, he knows that he's got a little bit of a hitchy kind of a skating style, and his determination, his character. You don't question that. And the one thing that he knew that he wanted to get better at was to be in better shape. So his skating would be better, and he worked on his skating. But he came in with no expectations. And that was great because he came into camp to earn a spot. And as a veteran guy who was played in the NHL, very refreshing to see that he wasn't feeling like he was entitled to any position, any role, any spot on the team. And he just works hard every night. And he's a guy that can come in and fill on the first line short term. Like he's not a high-end skilled player, and he's off to a great start. But, his game is all about being characters, retrieving pucks, getting to the front of the net. He's not afraid to shoot it. So the recent line that they had Bedard on with was Kurashev and Teravainen. Well, the problem that line kind of arises with that line is like who goes to the front of the net, who's going to go get the puck in the corner. So the dynamics of the line just kind of were a little bit off, and once they got in the offensive zone, too much on the perimeter. So they wanted to switch it up a little bit. And they had Foligno up there at times at the beginning of the season because he's the same type of a player as Donato. He's a forechecker. He's a banger. He's a crasher. He'll go to the front of the net. So they wanted to have that element on that line, and that's why they put Donato. But he's been off to a great start. Obviously, he's leading the team in goals, and I didn't have that penciled in for the first 12 or 13 games of the season. I don't think anybody did. But he's not taking anything for granted. He still has the same attitude. He's going to work hard. He's a guy that stays out after for practice. He's doing everything he can to stay in the lineup, and he's been a great fit just because he does those little things that you need on a line when you have two other skilled players playing alongside of him. So he's been a nice fit. They'll make some adjustments. I know that they've looked at Taylor Hall there. Teravainen has moved off that line now and playing in the spot that Donato was with Jason Dickinson and Mikheyev. So they've got different options right now, but they're going to stay with the hot hand, and Ryan Donato's got it. And the one thing he likes to shoot the puck, which is something that they wanted to have on that line. Rather than have three guys looking to set up plays, one guy at least is a shooter.
Troy, I've got to ask you one last thing because we are almost out of time. But look, it's kind of a big talking point today. Patrick Kane coming back to United Center for the second time. His first one was very memorable last year. Not only the ovation and the tributes, but then the overtime breakaway goal and his little showtime. It was really something you couldn't even write in a script. Is the hype less for this return for Pat Kane, or are they still pretty charged up?
No, they're charged up because, he meant so much to this franchise for so long, but it's not like it was last year. And I got to tell you a quick story because last year, after the game was over, our radio host, he goes downstairs and he has to leave within the last few minutes of the game and whatever. So he can't watch the game. It's only on TV. So from his little studio downstairs. So he's watching it and he says, this is too bad that Kane scored the goal, ruined the game. And I just went, whoa. This is what the fans came to see. It was a great game. It was a fantastic game. And then all of a sudden you get Patrick Kane. He's got a breakaway. He looks over his shoulders. He's got all kinds of time. He goes in there and makes it look so easy. The place went crazy, even though Detroit won the game, which never happens in Chicago. Like Detroit sucks. Never happens in Chicago. But the place just went bananas because the game was great. It was the Chelios night. The celebration was fantastic. The entertainment, the energy in the building was fantastic. And then Kane goes down and just scores one of his patent goals on a breakaway. It just, the place erupted and he did a little bit of a lap and everything. It was just a great return for Patrick Kane, regardless of whether the Blackhawks won the game or lost it. It was fantastic.
Well, Muzz, I guess that's why they call him Showtime. Hey,
It is.
I really appreciate you jumping on late notice today. I know you got work to do tonight, and we appreciate you coming on, give us a little insight what Dallas got to look forward to. And my brother, love you.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, appreciate it. We fight on, fighting Sioux, right?
You got it.
Thanks, Troy. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.